Sci-fi MMOs have been far and few in between in the realm of the MMORPG. In 2010, you had Global Agenda, a game that failed to capture a larger audience. 4 years later, and you had the launch of FireFall, another sci-fi based MMORPG that focused on its action elements and dynamic world events. With Mark Kern of Blizzard, a former team lead on the World of Warcraft project, and other talents such as Scott Youngblood of Siphon Filter, and Chris Whiteside, a lead producer on Guild Wars 1 working on the project at Red 5 Studios. It looked like sci-fi fans could finally rejoice, as a fun, new and exciting MMORPG experience could potentially capture their imaginations. But FireFall as of 2017 was shut down, and that version of the game was quite different from the original versions, plural. What went wrong with FireFall? Why did it seem to have a constant crisis of identity? And what of Mark Kern and the frankly celebrity-like aura surrounding him? Well, and his bust. I like to consider myself a detective, looking for clues, assessing alibis, and studying the evidence to make a conclusion. Sometimes you have to dig quite hard to find the culprit. In the case of FireFall, the culprit entered the house without gloves, bleeding, and leaving chunks of DNA everywhere, and then took a nap at the crime scene. Point being, it's not a subtle mystery as to why FireFall failed. So let's unpack it all. Mark Kern formed Red 5 Studios back in 2007. The initial vision was not so specific, or at least not totally apparent yet. Red 5 Studios did a recruiting exercise attempting to attract top-level talent. Not much was known of Red 5 Studios' activities between 2007 and 2010. At one point, they had a Shanghai office that closed and resulted in laying off 30 staff. Sometime later, a Chinese game developer, The Nine, acquired a $20 million majority stake in Red 5 Studios. The Nine wanted to use Red 5 Studios as a platform to expand their gaming and games to a Western market. Mark and crew were eager to use the new funds to create the game that they had in mind. This game, dubbed FireFall, was teased at PAX 2010 in September. FireFall in many ways seemed like Global Agenda, which had recently launched at the time, except with a stronger open-world focus. Sign me up, I said. FireFall showed yet again the next PAX of 2011, announcing their closed beta, still managing to stoke the flames of enthusiasm. The crowd was really feeling the game, somewhat due to the lull in sci-fi games at the time, but likely also had something to do with the amount of effort they put into their booth, advertising, and just how plain fun the game was. This story goes from one of the FireFall's launch to a bit more about Mark Kern, the CEO of Red 5 Studios, at least for now. Mark Kern seemed to think of himself as sort of a celebrity. Kern did truly bizarre things that he chalked up to being, well, good marketing. Kern's good marketing was a series of events where he took out numerous trademarks on broad ranges of things, many of which not related to his company Red 5 Studios or even his game FireFall. Take the website on screen. It showed 44 trademarks for a wide range of things, including novel, publications, web series, and TV shows, nearly all of which had 1 or 2 episodes and were eventually scrapped. And these just weren't side projects. Kern put tremendous amount of production and resources into these. What on earth is this music video, for example? What does post-apocalyptic have to do with FireFall? Oh, and these 2 Game of Thrones music videos?
My jizz is like baking soda.
I can't make this stuff up. Why was Mark Kern devoting all of this time and money to producing different series that had nothing to do with the game? For advertising? That's what he continued to claim throughout people's criticisms of him and his spending habits on such, well, frivolous things. The ultimate, advertising move by Kern came with the FireFall bus. The FireFall bus. The FireFall bus was to be a mobile marketing LAN center capable of having numerous computer stations with Wi-Fi internet. The bus was rumored to have been as much as $3 million. Kern sent the bus off to West Coast Customs, a rather popular pimp your ride kind of business that did extravagant upgrades on cars and bikes. The bus didn't seem to meet the expectations of Kern and crew though, and ended up missing all major premieres and being parked in a warehouse somewhere collecting dust. Not only was this bus a colossal waste of time and money, it also demonstrated how allergic to criticism Mark Kern was, as he took to Twitter to berate everyone who had something bad to say about the infamous bus. The bad news is, this wasn't an isolated instance for Kern. Even amongst his own development team at Red 5, they seemed to both fear and dislike Mark at the same time. Brutal Whimsy, the inside guy at Red 5 Studios, posted a quite complete account of a number of Red 5 and FireFall failings. One of the most impactful things that he highlighted was eyewitness accounts of Mark Kern and his failings as a leader. He would swoop in one afternoon and berate a series of features teams had spent months on, declaring they'd begin again and listen to what he told them to do. He'd be back in a few days to see if it was done. This crushed morale and forced people into spontaneous, isolated crunch mode. He would shout and scream his perspectives. He would ignore anything that didn't fit his immediate viewpoint, which was subject to sudden and violent changes. He would rage email people in the small hours of the night or on weekends. This was more than just one person's opinion as well. Even on Glassdoor, a website dedicated to rating different companies and their employment, seemed to demonstrate much of the same. The CEO goes through spurts and can be there for weeks at a time, then suddenly disappears. He tries to compensate by having open company meetings for anyone who would like to attend, but if he does not postpone or cancel, it is nothing but hearing his ideas and what books he has read. This sounds much like Brad McQuain during his development of Vanguard's Saga of Heroes, a nearly absent CEO who only seemed to show up to criticize or scramble what little direction was present at the time. This shouldn't be a surprise with Kern's laundry list of other activities he had participated in, but this is not an excuse for a CEO. The leader of the company, the face of the company, should also be the lead of what the direction is meant to be. But when the leader fails to not only lead but implement a vision for his company to follow, you have a snake without a head. It just sort of flails about. Well, at least you have a dev team who's pretty self-sufficient, which is not always common. Red 5 Studios did eventually vote Mark Kern out, making him the last of the original founders from Blizzard Entertainment to leave the company in late 2013. Kern had been with the company since its inception, nearly 7 years, and didn't see a single product launch through. With Kern changing ideas on a whim, and the company structure being one that, well, had no structure, it's no wonder FireFall's vision has constantly changed throughout the years of development. The game started as a PvE-PvP hybrid, similar to Global Agenda, but with more focus on esports PvP and even open PvP. This was supported by Red 5 Studios' announcement in a $1 million prize pool for their esports. Nothing ever came of that $1 million, or really the esports portion of FireFall. Instead, they decided to shut down the PvP portion of FireFall during its closed beta. Red 5 wanted time to rethink their approach, due to not getting the reception they had wanted. This is a problem. Not only is it often not a good idea to make a game esports from the beginning, as you need to focus on the game being fun and scalable first, putting this immense amount of monetary pressure through a $1 million prize pool also isn't a good idea so early on in a game's development cycle. But I think this is because, well, Red 5 Studios didn't even know what they wanted to do with the title. FireFall launched in 2014, July 29th, as a free-to-play game. The game was rather different at this point. Its beta had been ongoing for nearly 3 years, and through constant remodelings, looked and played like a haphazardly thrown together shooter MMO that lacked progression and lacked the meaning in its missions and PvE content. Critics rated the game 60 out of 100 on Metacritic, both of the highest reviews, both scoring a 77, made a point to highlight the cool aspects of the game, but both were quite blunt in that the game felt far too much as a work in progress. FireFall suffered from repetitive questing, especially due to the nature of having to run across the map and run right back FedEx style. This is the stuff we complain about in non-action MMOs, but an action shooter MMO with boring quests? That doesn't even follow. FireFall launched without Mark Kern at the helm and continued to flounder for nearly 2 years following its launch. We can't just blame Mark Kern for the lack of the game's direction. Really, it's more due to the fact that the game tried a lot and did none of it particularly well. FireFall was a pit of ideas. Everyone collectively gathered around and threw in their own ideas, including the community, who had a knee-jerk reaction to esports PvP, which then made the game PvE focused, but then the game couldn't even support full-scale PvE, or at least a full-scale PvE open world, and relied on instances for raids. At the end, you had this steaming pile of dung that lost its cinematic feeling portrayed in the wonderful launch trailers. It lost its meaningfulness when they relied too heavily on rinse and repeat quests. Think of a game as having a certain amount of real estate. Let's say it's a house. FireFall is more like a mansion, with nearly empty rooms, clashes of styles and ideas, halfway renovated and partially remodeled, etc. You only have so much estate to manage. If you keep cutting out parts of the house to create other parts, you're going to lose what the original essence of the game was meant to be, or at least supposed to be, especially when you remove aspects of the game that people actually liked. FireFall had the budget, the marketing, and the profile of a AAA title meant to leave its mark on the MMO and gaming sphere. What we got instead was a game that peaked at 6,465 players, lost all founders of the company, wasted tons of money on non-essential things, and carried on in a beta for years. It's no wonder people didn't want to play the game at launch or even after, not only because of the lack of identity, but probably because they had already been playing the game for months on end during its near 3-year beta run. As FireFall struggled to breathe like a fish out of water, Mark Kern smugly from the sideline advised people to just not play the game if they don't like it. Sage advice, Mark. Red 5 Studios celebrated its 2015 Christmas by not paying its employees. Sitting under the company's Christmas tree was a letter from Santa. Hi team, I regret to inform you that Red 5 currently does not have the funds necessary to meet our payroll scheduled for today, Friday, December 25th. Due to this, there will not be payroll paid this week. Red 5 and the 9, our parent company, is currently working to resolve this during the holidays as soon as possible. We are hopeful we will be able to resolve this and will update the team immediately. Luckily, they were paid on the 30th, but unluckily was the casualty of upward of 45 employees who were let go the following months. You know how people refer to the final straw, that final thing that breaks the camel's back? Well, in this case, the camel's back had been broken repeatedly for quite a while. It just kept hobbling along as people looked at it with pity, remorse, and some even disdain. Why not just put it out of its misery, some wondered. Well, someone finally did. July of 2017, FireFall was finally shut down, giving their loyal, okay, let's just call them hopeful audience 48 hours notice that the game was shutting down. FireFall is supposed to get a mobile game. No details on that, unfortunately, or fortunately. FireFall was another case study of prominent designer developers who had previously been involved in strong games such as World of Warcraft, thinking they sort of have the golden touch to an extent, taking the horizontal company structure famous in companies such as Valve, subtracting direction in the CEO's presence, and well, you have FireFall. Projects don't need elaborate hierarchies of business, not when the team has a strong unified vision and is full of self-motivated and self-guided developers and designers. But when your CEO is hardly there, and then when he is there, he tells you that you're doing something wrong, something you came up mostly on your own volition, well, people understandably didn't want to create anymore. Instead, they just listened to the fan base and those around them to attempt to create what the audience's vision of the game was, which is totally backwards. FireFall's demise sucks for all. I think MMOs getting more action-oriented combat could reach a broader audience ultimately. Not to mention, FireFall managed to make quite the cinematic spark with its trailers. It's a shame we won't ever get to see another sci-fi MMO until Star Citizen comes out in 2068, guys. Thanks for watching.